Despite how this looks, this is not a chess video, but I wanted to show you the two places I got this idea from. And as I play through this game quickly, please ignore the board and just look at this little bar on the side with the red lines right in the middle. So, a little left to where it says 0.0, it starts just left of there and goes down the length of the board. And as the game goes, it shows the advantage over the game. So it's not shown during the game, but you can look at it after and you can see, it's come down a little. I'm playing black here. This is not a good game I played. We'll see that. Um, but white is slightly better in this opening, and it goes a little past the halfway point in favor of white. If we flipped the board, now we would see it's a little, we're now seeing from white's perspective, it's a little on our side. But let's look at the game from my perspective. So I'm going to flip back. I'm playing a slightly weird opening, but also black should be a little worse. I grabbed this pawn. It's a move I enjoy playing. The computer doesn't love it. That's fine. But, it's hovering between white is a little better. I love my trick here. But white is a little better and black is about equal. Somewhere in that range. My trick basically works and I reach a position that I don't play perfectly. You'll notice it hopping around a bit. But black ends up a little better here. I miss winning a pawn because I'm an idiot. This was not a well-played game. But you can see now black is a little better, and I maintain that for a bit. And then kind of blow it, and we're back around equal, and you can see it's back around the middle. Maybe white's a little better again. They make a bad move. Now I can start pushing my majority. You can see black's advantage is growing. Here, however, I end up missing something, and you can see it went to big advantage for black, and after my terrible move, drops back right to equal. And you can see it hop around. They make a bad move, it goes back up. I'm about to make some bad moves, and it will come back down. In our defense, we were very low on time at this point, as I recall. But maybe not that low. Anyways, I started playing really badly here, and you can see it went from a big advantage to about equal. And I'm going to start making... Now I'm clearly worse. Now I'm just busted. But you can see it moves around, and it's a kind of nice way to view the story of how a game goes. And if we scroll down, you can sort of see that in graph form, where you can see white's a little better for a bit, black's a little better for a bit, white catches up, nope, black's better for a while, often a bit better. And then I really blow it, white is crushing, white's completely winning, they blow it, and then we get to a later point where I'm winning. But I like this kind of chart. I like this presentation of a game. I think this also has to do with like Texas Hold'em, where something really appealing if you're watching poker is that you can see the odds. You can see, oh, they're 73%, they're 22%. What an idiot they are. And then the flop comes and it's like deuce, 3, and let's make it exciting, 8. And suddenly it flips. Now they're 88% and they're 12%. Because if a king comes, that doesn't help the king-queen anymore. The king-8 now have 2 pair. And then, I don't know, should we make a queen come on the river? Let's make a queen come on the river. Surprise, it flips again. The queen wins. And seeing those odds as you watch, especially when you're someone who doesn't know anything about poker, is, I think, a really kind of invitingly fun way to feel like you know what's going on, even though that's like a very early layer of what's going on. But it creates this nice sense of access and also creates this storyline to the hand that is visible to you as a viewer, and a different story is being told by the players, but you get your own story based on these percentages you see. And I've always thought that was really nice presentation and a good presentation. I remember in a college watching a poker tournament, I don't know why, and finding it really engaging. It was the World Series of Poker main event, because that was the thing that was on TV. It was on Justin TV, if people remember that, back before Twitch. And it was the one Joe Hashem ended up winning. But that hooked me, and I watched poker for a while. And I got not terrible at it. I'm net up money on my life, which many people claim to be, but not many people are. But, I think it's a nice aspect of poker. So I wanted to do something like this for Triple Triad. And because I have like solver related stuff, it can spit out this position is winning, tied, or lost with perfect play. But the thing that's really obvious looking through all our games, including my own, we don't play perfectly. We make mistakes. And sometimes we reach a losing position, but practically, we have decent chances. Sometimes we have a winning position, And practically, we're just going to tie this game. That's a move we're never going to find, right? And so what I wanted to do was build something that sort of told the story of a game, gave those win percentage odds, but did it based on how humans actually play. Had enough variables going in that it could understand, yes, this is a winning position, but no, the odds of winning are not particularly high. Or this is a drawn position with perfect play, but this is incredibly hard to defend and much more likely to actually be a win for someone in reality. And by showing that chart, you can see kind of amazing saves, or when someone really locks in the win early and just holds on, or when someone finds ways to complicate even though they're really in trouble and keeps making it tough. And I wanted to put that in a chart form. So I used as my data sample the recent Christmas GB. I put in every game from it. It took me a whole bunch of hours to put in. I got better at putting stuff in. And I ran a multiple linear regression to come up with a formula to say, this is how I'm going to estimate win percentage in various positions. And it's going to be a score between 0 and 100. And 0 suggests that basically the second turn player has won. The higher numbers will mean first turn is favored. Lower numbers will always mean second turn is favored. So 0 means the second turn player, it thinks, will always win this position. Now, it turns out that's not the case. There are definitely spots that will say 0 where the odds are not 100% that second turn will win. 100 means it is confident first turn will win. Again, this ends up not being quite right, but it is a decent estimate. These are positions that it just thinks locked first turn win. 50 could mean different things. At the end of a game, 50 means it thinks it's going to be a tie. At the start of a game, 50 might mean it thinks it's really drawish, but it might think, first turn wins a lot, but second turn wins a lot too. So 50 means balanced, and interpreting that at different points of the game will take, paying some attention. I think I can do a lot of cool things with this system, especially as I improve it. I'm going to keep making tweaks to it. One thing I can do, though, that I think is cool, is it will judge how difficult your random is and how the hands match up. So it can say, on average in this sample, first turn scored 53%. So, the average result is even, but it's a few more wins for first turn than second turn. However, it can also say, okay, it's 53%, but your hand is trash. You're expected to score 36% here. Or you have a great hand specifically against their hand. You might be expected to score 70%. So now I'm going to move over to the chart, and it's not the most beautiful thing. Thank you so much to Turds for helping me do this. He did a lot of the putting this together. I did most of the stat stuff, and he did... Can I make this a little bigger for you? Yeah. He did a bunch of making like drop-down menus here, where you can pick what tournament you want the games from. At some point, I will make this public. At this point, we only have the Xmas GB, but at some point, other tournaments will be able to be put in. What round it was. This was all one round tournament, so there are no round choices, but other tournaments there will have options. And just game 1 through 93. I have 93 games put in, and you can see it's got all of them. And so we can look at this first one. I'm just going to click through a few. I'm not trying to highlight any specific thing, but I'm hiding some of the odds underneath. But you can see it started really close to 50%. Oops, I did not mean to go to game 14. But okay, we'll start with game 14. We'll go from here. So first turn had an advantage that looks like around 53% to me. It starts a little above the 50% line, so very normal hand matchup. Akiyama maybe manages to grow a tiny bit of pressure, but Addy really keeps it balanced the whole way. This point where it drops under 50% towards the end is probably too late to make a difference, and I think this looks to me like a very balanced tie. Now, I don't know which game is which, but let's just go to game 15. We started with game 14. I put in game 15. It will tell us who the matchup is in a moment. It's running a little slowly because I'm recording and that slows everything down. So you can see the green bars. It figures things out. This is Dalamar versus Vid. This was a slightly bad random for Dalamar. One thing this can do is I did one of the things at the bottom that you can't see anymore. Says how lucky various players got. And I have Dalamar, based on the hands he got, as the third unluckiest player in the tournament. The four unluckiest players were Franco, who just had horrible hands. Yevon, I think, was second worst, but I could be remembering wrong. Um, and then third unluckiest was Dalamar, and Turds was fourth unluckiest. And I would normally just say top three, the medals, but Turds actually almost won the tournament, and by my estimation, was between half a win and a win less lucky in the hands he got than Vid and Delial, who were his main competitors. So there's definitely an argument there that if Turds had gotten better hands, this would have been a tournament he would have been slight favorite to win, given how they played. So here you can see Vid gets a nice advantage by the middle game and manages to convert. Now, is this position, this first low point, I can't really highlight it or show you where I'm pointing, but this first low point after it goes downhill, I don't actually know. We could check, but I don't know if that position was lost or not. But that's not what it's saying. It's saying this is an incredibly difficult position to defend. Anytime it's under that 25% line, it means it thinks there is more chance second turn will win than first turn will get a tie, and often by quite a decent amount. So that's just really tough to defend, and Vid does end up converting that one. And let's just click through more games. Again, I'm not trying to highlight any particular player. I just wanna... This runs a lot faster, incidentally, when I'm not recording. Alright, so here's a game where Yevon had a solid slight hand advantage. Looks like mostly the first turn advantage. But Dalamar played nicely to get some advantage. Yevon came back, but it was not enough to convert, and Dalamar held. And I think it's neat to have this kind of story of the game. And I know you're not seeing the game, so it's hard for you to look at, but I'm hoping to maybe run this kind of thing live while watching games and see how it shows up. Here, Addy had a just miserable starting hand against Yevon, and it looks to me like Yevon played it pretty well, but Addy held on long enough he was able to hold the tie. Right? This doesn't look like, Yevon made a bunch of mistakes so it shot up. It went up at the end when it became clear there wasn't quite a way to win. So to me, this looks like a really well-played game. I think this is the kind of chart you see for a game where you have one player who has a bad hand, the other player presses, and that first player manages to hold this time. But I could be reading it wrong. I'm not used to looking at these charts. Again, some things to note. At the end, it's usually going to jump towards either 150 or 0 as it locks into a result. In fact, the final mark is just the result of the game. So the final dot has to be 150 or 0, and the second to final dot is its final prediction. And generally, anything it has between kind of 30 and 70 means it's pretty locked tie, and it hasn't quite realized that should all be 50 yet. But occasionally there are mistakes then. I did catch a few mistakes made that late in the game. Another thing, of course, is that first dot really shows you whose hand had the advantage. Here it thinks Yevon's hand had a big advantage, though, as I said, I think Yevon was pretty unlucky overall, though I might be confusing him with someone else. Another thing we might be able to see is games like I think actually Slash of Times, all his games happened much later in the tournament, but he had a bunch of hands where he was like in a lot of trouble from the outset, like 30% at the outset, and he held a ton of those games. And then he had a bunch of games where he was 70% at the outset, and he converted like all of those games. And everything that wasn't those, he drew. So he had a really steady, solid, impressive tournament. And every time he had an advantage, or most of the time, he was really good at converting it. And with neutral positions, they tended to stay neutral. And when he was behind, he managed to bring those to neutral. And I thought that was pretty impressive. And I wonder if we'll be able to see more kind of stylistic cues of players by looking at stories in this way. And some games you can see are decided earlier than others. How quickly does it hit that 25 or 75 mark? Or even some games it hits like 100 with lots of moves to go because someone has made mistakes or someone has made really good moves. And yeah, so I hope this is a presentation I can do for games in the future where I can show different kind of games through this lens, but also there might be interesting things. I like being able to say after a tournament, hey, this player got really unlucky. Their performance might not look that amazing, but they probably played well. This one looks like another really well played game to me. Looks like this time Addy got some advantage, but Vid did a nice job keeping it under control. Now again, it might say at some point that actually Addy was winning this game, and Vid made a losing mistake at some point, maybe even very early on, maybe that jump at the start. But being winning where there's a very narrow path to the win that early doesn't in fact mean your chance of winning is all that high. And so I like this as a kind of, yeah, storytelling presentation, and that's really what I'm trying to do here. And I think it'll be fun to apply this to various other tournaments. I think the formula is pretty well worked out. It might be a little too fit to specifically random games rather than hand games. I'm not sure if I can pull my formula over exactly. And I also don't know if this was a multi-level random tournament, right? It was level 4 and 5. So potentially it had randoms that were more biased towards players than other tournaments will be, right? Easier to get screwed or get a huge advantage off the random. And that might also have biased the sample. I think it was, though, a very good tournament to start with because it has a really big sample of games. It has players of, I think, a lot of different levels of play, but with a special a number of really strong players. Here you can see, and this sucks for Franco because he's playing Delial, and Delial gets a crushing random against him. The Delial, about neutral luck on the randoms, so don't judge from just a single game. But poor Franco here, and you can see there was a noble effort to hold, but that's a tough game to try to not lose. Yeah. So I like it as a potential luck measure. I think it might be able to tell us some things about style. You might be able to notice things of so and so is really good at defending these difficult but not lost positions, like a little over that 25% mark. Maybe they're really good at holding, or maybe there's someone who every time they hit 75%, they always end up winning. That would be really interesting to see. And yeah, I also think there could be player rating systems based on it. You know, every move you made, did your line go up? Did it go down when you made moves? Did you do moves above what it thought the expectation for a player was in your position, or did you perform under that expectation? Right? If a player is consistently outperforming what it thinks they'll do, and I could have built in a player strength adjustment in here, but I wanted it to be kind of neutral and not knowing who the players were. I thought that was the more interesting way to frame it. Like, you know, you put me in a poker hand with Daniel Negreanu, and like the odds it's telling you are not the actual odds I'm going to win a hand. You know, if I'm playing, he probably doesn't count as that aggressive for modern poker, but he did back when I was watching. So you take some modern online nut job, you know, one of the Germans or whatever, and like they're just going to win way more hands off me than that percentage ever tells you. That percentage is not supposed to be telling you that, but I think it's more interesting when the percentage kind of tells you a neutral fact about it rather than, nice win by Addy here, rather than something that just tells you, oh, you know, great player playing okay player, great player starts as huge favorite, converts. Instead, you can have something like here, Akiyama versus Franco, Akiyama's favorite, but you can see, you know, he keeps a steady advantage and eventually manages to bring it home here. But you could imagine if I was adjusting for player strength, it might look quite different. I guess that's it. This is running so slowly. It runs so much faster when I don't have the solver going. Sorry, not the solver, the recording going. I noticed this happening a bit with running the bots. Is if I try to run the bots and record at the same time, the bots go from taking like 3 seconds a move to taking like 30 seconds a move. Recording is really CPU intensive, and I didn't know. This looks like a nicely played tie. Some ties are more nicely played than others. One thing you'll notice is there's not many games where it gets it really wrong. And I think that's something it's well built to do. There are actually positions in here where a player was lost and it says they are large favorite. Or favorite. You know, it says, actually an example was Turds Franco. Uh, I will throw Turds under the bus here for all the time he's helped me. But Franco played some really interesting moves against Turds, and Turds was really trying to find a win, and he said, let me know what you think of the game. I don't think I had a win. And I checked the game, and he was right. He didn't have a win, but actually, in his pressing to win, he was lost to a really hard move to find, but for a hot second, he was lost. And if we could find that game, I don't know what number that game is, and I don't want to show you all my other spreadsheets here because they're a real mess. But it's actually interesting because it knows Franco is winning at some point. But because of the general trajectory of the game, it also knows that when players have been under this much pressure and get one little chance, they spot it very infrequently. So it correctly says, even though Turds could be in trouble here, and if it had been led to by other moves, it would think Turds was in trouble. It thought Turds was pretty safe there, and they ended up tying the game. Franco defended well. And I think it's actually just a pretty well played and quite interesting game. I'm not saying this to be like, there was the misplays here. I think Franco played interesting creative moves, creating nice synergies with his cards. Turds had clear pressure and attacked it in really sensible ways. But it just so happened that Franco was winning. And it also is the case that this understood that in human terms, Turds probably wasn't in danger. And that's something it does quite well. And it also means it does some interesting things. You'll see some games. Let's get an example of someone winning, and I'll try to say, okay, something like this. It is entirely possible that Yevon was winning early, but it didn't think the odds of converting were that high, and it took a bunch more moves before it thought he was winning. But actually, that's not quite the kind of example I was looking for. No, that won't do either. Sorry, one moment. What I'm looking for is a time when... Alright, so here's an example. It is possible that Addy was winning at some point around the 75% mark here, and that he was still winning when it stays at 75, right? Because there's a move where it stays at 75. It's possible he was winning and he missed the win, but it still thought in positions like this, you're really likely to win. And that's something I've noticed, is there's a pretty high win rate for players who are clearly better most of the way, but do miss a win. Now here you might not say he was better that much of the way, so maybe this isn't an instance. I haven't found an instance. But that strong players often will earn a winning position early and not play the forced win, but play a move that has so much pressure, they're going to win later anyway. And so this often has this funny thing where someone misses a win and it stays really confident. Sometimes someone misses a win and it gets even more confident they're going to win the game, because in practice, that kind of situation actually is winning quite often, as long as their next move still applies a ton of pressure. And so this is a case, and I have no idea if it is in this game in particular, I'm just using this as an example, and to show kind of the funny things this does that I might want to iron out, but I kind of like, is there's a chance Addy missed a win here, and it thinks he still played a really good move. And that's a nice thing for a chart to be able to show. And then the next move, Fialva showed, no, I can defend this position. And it went, oh, this is just going to be a tie, and went very close to 50. And you see that quite a bit, and it's sort of curious to see, because it feels like the mistake happened and the odds didn't change. But really what it's saying is, when that mistake happens but still applies pressure, it's still on the opponent to find a good move. And it's really hard to find good moves, especially when you've been under pressure the whole game, or chunks of it. So I guess that's it. I have 83 games here. We will certainly not skip through all of them. But I hope this seems like an interesting way to present things. And if anyone has ideas for how we could use this, I think measuring the luck different players get is useful. I think it does a pretty decent job of checking hand matchups. Again, this was only used on random, only level 4, level 5. but we can definitely build this tool into something that can also judge hand matchups and also say your hand lined up badly against theirs when they had first turn, but it would have lined up pretty well if you had first turn. And that's going to be something we see a lot because, right, if I have Squall and Cypher and you have Squall and Cypher, then whoever has last turn is going to be the last one who gets to play Squall or Cypher off all the other Squalls and Cyphers. And that's going to favor them, right? So there are certainly going to be situations where a hand is favored whether or not they're first or second turn, and other situations where whoever got first turn or whoever got second turn is going to be favored in the matchup, and you might think you had a bad or a good hand, but it turns out you happen to land on the right turn order. And that'd be something we could check here. So there's the luck stuff. I think just the narrative of a game is just neat. I think that's interesting. I think it could be a player evaluation metric. I'm a little skeptical of it as that. I'm not sure, but I think there's probably some way to convert it into an interesting metric for player evaluation. I think more likely it could be kind of like a skill evaluation where it's not an all-encompassing stat, but it kind of asks, how often do you get up to 75% chances? How often do you drop to 25%? How often do you defend tough positions? How often do you win good positions? How often do you start from worse hands or worse randoms and come out on top? How often do you sustain advantages? And the player I noticed when looking through this most was Slash, because I really thought he was the most consistent case. And you're not going to see someone look the same every game, of course, but his games to me really looked like when he is a good hand, he's got such a good chance to win. You're in a ton of danger. When he has a bad hand, he's going to do a really good job of getting it close to 50 and keeping it there, right? None of the games where he started way behind did he somehow come back to win. I don't think. Maybe one. But mostly that wasn't what was happening. None of the games where he started way behind did he immediately crash and get in a lot of danger. All of them he pretty quickly got back to that 40-50 range and just held a comfortable game out of a tough position. And that's cool to see. And that's something I'm not sure I would have gotten out of his tournament run here, where I think he's didn't finish, so he's going to come 5th or 6th or something, or at highest maybe 4th. I don't know exactly, but had a pretty impressive run. Also, from looking at these charts, I've been consistently impressed by Addy. I think he only lost one game to Dalamar, and also from most of the charts it looked like he was often the one pushing if the game started neutral. Obviously, if you start way ahead or way behind, you can't guarantee being pushing, but Addy tended to be the one with more pressure from neutral games. But that's another thing to say, how do you perform from neutral? How do you perform from ahead? How do you perform from behind at the start? And maybe how do you do from different points in the game from that? You could make some cool kind of maybe radar charts of player skill sets. And I think while that wouldn't be, a perfect metric for overall quality of play, it could be a really interesting one for just talking about and looking at players. Vialva's another one, just because he has such a interesting style that I don't say did you like the food? It was interesting. I don't mean it like that. I mean, he clearly really prioritizes combo play and is happy to enter into very chaotic, uncontrolled positions and enjoy what happens there. And this leads to some spectacular traps he pulls off. I made a video a while ago about a phenomenal win against Akiyama, and some games where it just turns out the combos fizzle and there was nothing there. It also leads to ties a lot, where he just creates a bunch of chaos on board and the opponent finds some way to steady it, and which just leads to a tie. But whatever happens, it's always fun, and it feels like he might be a player that this could spot some interesting things with. Or maybe it won't. I don't know. It's a new tool. I don't really know what it's doing. I hope it seems interesting to you. And if you have any thoughts on how to use it, or you want to see charts of any of your games in it, I would be very eager to explore more, because I have some ideas, but I would love to have more ideas.